Audie Ashworth, his manager, had a house right at the corner of Belmont and Woodmont Boulevard, and they had a studio in the basement, and I'd go over there and hang out, and Cale was just like a pal, you know, or I was his friend, and then he said, well, hey, why don't you go on this tour with us? That was like in 77, I'm guessing, something like that. Yeah, he was playing, you know, he was really big in Europe at the time. As a matter of fact, when I went over to Sweden and Norway with Skeeter Davis, I saw there was posters of Cale all around because he was over there doing a European tour. And I think he went to the session when Eric Clapton did After Midnight. Seems to me like because Nick Rather was playing bass with him at the time, and Nick I still talk to quite often. And, you know, that's what he said. He remembers going in the studio. I think Ringo was in there, but it was just kind of wild to go to Eric Clapton, you know, session with Cale, and he didn't talk about it very much. I remember I called him once and said, he said, man, Clapton's wanting to come stay with me. What should I do? And I went, well, I don't know, Cale. I mean, it sounds like a good deal to me. He said, I just don't know. He just was real private, so private. That's the wonder I got into his life like I did, you know, but I was just a carefree kind of guy, you know, and now I didn't look at him as JJ Cale. I didn't look at Leon as Leon Russell. That was just like my friends, you know, and I don't know how to describe that more than that, but so that's how I got to know those guys, because I wasn't detrimental to their health or something, you know. So Cale, he was telling me Clapton was wanted to stay with him, and he said, I just don't know. I just don't like having anybody here. He said, but I guess I should. I made $7 million off of him. I said, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea, you know. You know, and he said, well, I can get him a good room down here right down the road. They got a nice hotel. And I'm going, I don't know, Cale. You ought to. I think he ended up staying there a couple of days with him, but then he got him a room, is what it was, and his band. So another time, Cale, friends of mine called me playing with Neil Young. And they were engineering for Neil Young, Chad Haley. No, it was Grant Boatwright who called me. And he was friends with Neil, real good friends. And Neil kind of looked after him. And he said, Kenner, Neil wants Cale to play on his album. And he said, you're the only one I know that knows him. Can you call back? I'll give you Neil's number and give us to Cale and have him call us if he wants to do it. That's the only way he figured it out without having to exchange numbers in a weird way. So I called Cale, and for a while, Cale, I'd call him and he wouldn't pick up the phone, and then he'd call back. And he said, okay, every time I see a 615 area code here, he said, I always think somebody's calling to tell me somebody died. He said, I'm so sorry, so tired of hearing people call me and tell me somebody died. I said, well, Cale, if you see this number, I will never call you and tell you somebody died. You'll hear it from somebody else. I'm just calling to chit-chat with you, you know. I said, but the reason I'm calling is because Neil Young wants you to record on his album, play some guitar part on his album. He goes, oh, man, that sounds like work to me. And he says, what would you do? What should I tell him? And I said, well, just tell him you're dragging anchor right now. He goes, dragging anchor? Is that yours? I said, yeah. He said, can I have that? And I said, yeah, you can have that. You never had to write nothing with it, but I did, called Dragon Anchor. But I wouldn't have wrote it if he hadn't liked it. You know what I mean? It was good enough for Cale to jump up and down with. So anyway, so he ended up doing it. I think they sent him the tapes, and he recorded and sent them back. I think that's the way it went.
It seems like Neil and JJ Cale would be on the same frequency in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. But Cale's a lot more private than Neil is, even though Neil is too, I know for sure, but Cale would be a lot more harder to get. I mean, Cale, I went on tour one time, they had I think it was the first time out, they were selling selling T-shirts out front, said the last known picture of JJ Cale, and it was a frame with nothing in it. That's what they were selling for T-shirts, you know.
Well, I heard rumors that he lived in an Airstream down by the Cumberland River.
Yeah.
At some point. Is that true?
Oh, yeah. Well, he moved. He had a couple of them. But he had the one down there when Audie had the house over on Belmont, and Cale lived in the littlest Airstream you've ever seen. I think it's called a Bambi or a Bubble. whatever the littlest one was, that's where he lived. And he said he liked it that way. If he didn't like his neighbors, he'd just go to another campsite, because he said, I got to know them, But
I heard he stayed at the one over by the Opry, right there by.
Yeah, that's the one right below the bridge, right below Bradley Parkway Bridge. There's a campground down there. It's always flooded if there's a high water there. But that's where he stayed, and that's where he lived till he got his house out on Old Hickory Lake. He called the Lake House, and it was a really nice house, and he had a boat down there. Walk down to the dock, and I'd go out there every now and then. And one day he called me. He said, "I want you to bring some bluegrass guys out here." He said, "I don't know what'll happen, but we're just recording my living room." So I go out there, I'll never forget, he had real nice clip speakers in the corner, the big corner clips, which I always loved. And he had those, but he had speakers all over the house. And he told me later, he said, what I do, he said, when he recording at home or at the studio, and he'd bring them over there and mix it over there. But he'd take it, in every room, he'd go play that song or the songs in that speaker configuration and go to another room and listen, figure out what he's missing, and go back and remix it so he could hear everything he wanted in every speaker situation. He said, when I'd go have it mastered, you could take it to a mastering room, and he said those mastering guys always want to tweak it or put their little thing on there. I'd say, here it is, don't touch nothing, let's go have coffee for the next 20 minutes and come back and we'll flip it over and do the other side. So he wouldn't let them master it. Touch it, tweak it. He said, I got it like I want it. I know. And I'm sure that, they probably didn't appreciate that, but that's the way he did it. I thought he's an eccentric guy when it came to recording. And I remember one time we were in, I don't remember, somewhere in Canada. I go in this hotel room and this amplifier's completely apart. I opened the door. Cale, what are you doing, man? He said, I'm trying to get this thing to work, and you got to get out here so I can have to work by showtime. I'm going, my God, it's just, he's rewiring the whole thing. He's always working on his guitar, rewiring that thing, and or adding stuff to it. There's my JJ Cale guitar over there. If you see, over there, it's got same about years of harmony, and I got an old Danny Electro pickup on there and a P90 I put on there. That's what he started with. And I remember giving him a silver tone that had a Danny Electro like that, a Danny Electro black sparkle. I gave him that guitar I found in a pawn shop in Houston for $100, and I knew he liked that guitar. So I gave it to him, and I think he took the pickups out. I don't think he ever used a guitar, and I think he put the pickup in Christine's, his wife's guitar, because next time I saw her, she had a pickup in the guitar. He wanted that rhythm. He liked that tone, which I do too,
So he just liked to tinker with stuff.
Yeah, he was exactly. That's what he called it. He liked tinkering with it, and he's always tinkering, and he always had the best microphones. He liked vintage gear, and that's who got me into vintage gear, was Cale, not realizing the value of it or anything, but certain things I'd play. The last time I played with him, I played bass, and you can find that online. JJ Cale on tour with, in 1981. I forget what it's called. I think it's JJ Cale on tour 1981. It was just his wife, Christine, and Bill Boatman, and me and Cale, and traveling for about 3 weeks, all over everywhere, the West Coast and Canada. And so this particular show I have is playing, it's at Red Rocks. We were playing Red Rocks in like 77, I think it was, maybe 78. But and that's when they had the 51 Nocaster telly, and they had a Tweed Twin that was serial number 8, the prototype, which I've since got to Keith Richards, because he collects those. That's what he plays on stage, is those Tweed Twins, high watt Tweed Twins, and he collects those, and that's all he plays through on stage, unless a little bitty place. But anyway, he got serial number 8, and that's what I had on stage at Red Rocks that day. So I normally been playing the rhythm guitar, and it was the best band with Buddy Emmons and Farrell Morris playing percussion, and Karstein on drums, Nick Rather on bass, Bill Boatman on guitar, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody else. Probably Jamie Nichols was playing congas. And so I was playing that guitar and Red Rocks, as far as you can see people. I mean, and Cale's over there sitting down doing this deal, and comes time for the solo on, I think is Cajun Moon or one of my favorite songs. I can't remember which it was. Comes time for the solo, and he looks at me like, play the solo. And I went, what? Look back at, he's playing the solo. He said, play the solo. So I started playing the solo, and the best gear, best guitar, best amp, and everybody in the whole place just stands up and screams like, well, yeah, that's what we've been waiting on, somebody to light the fire, And I get to it. It was my favorite song, and I just played a great solo, and I looked at him, okay, I'm done. He goes, no, play some more. I play some more. Everybody just starts screaming more, and I'm going, and I think he was just ragging me because I asked Nick about it. I said, he was just trying to put me on the spot, wasn't he? He said, yeah, man, he was just trying to embarrass you, but you made it, turned it around, and everybody loved it. So the next few days, I remember him going, Kenner, why don't you turn up your guitar a little bit? Put a more treble on it. Put a little more treble on that guitar. He was razzing me. So let me tell you this story before I forget. So we were playing in Kansas City, I think, and so Cale, we get through playing, and I'd pack Cale's amp up in whatever gear. He may have had a pedal, but I don't think he did. He just plugged direct to the deal. So I'd put his amp in the case and roll it off, and then putting my stuff in the case and rolling it off, and Cale comes looking for me, and Kenner, he was so pissed off. Kenner, ain't you supposed to be watching my gear? I said, well, I put it in the case, Cale, and I rolled it to the back of the stage so we could load it. He said, well, I just caught a guy stealing it, going down the alley, rolling it down the alley. And he said, we almost had a fist fight, had a push and pull. Give me my amp back, and so he said, it ain't even my amp. It's Raffensperger's amp. He said, it's not even my amp. You're letting somebody steal it. And I said, well, Cale, I can't watch all this stuff. I mean, I'm just packing up. I can't help it if somebody comes along and, wheels it out of here. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not watching. Maybe I should, but I apologize, and, he forgave me, I know he did, but.
Did he have a temper?
Well, he did then. And sometimes he'd have a temper, I mean, Leon had a temper, but you didn't see it very much. I mean, one day we were playing in San Antonio, and Peter Frampton's band was coming on. We were the opening act for Peter Frampton, and his roadie got real in my face. Get your crap out of here, man. He just started unloading on me, man, right in my face. And Leon walked up and got on. Said, don't you ever talk to my band guys like that. I don't ever hear that again. And the guy kind of cowered down when Leon walked up to let him have it, I mean, Leon, because that guy was really chewing me out. He was really an asshole. And Leon became one then, like I'd never seen before, He lived in another KOA campground right at the back lot of Disneyland. So you sit there, I mean, he had one of those little Bambi or whatever the littlest one's called, and he had a little wash tub, aluminum wash tub. He bathed himself with, and he'd stay under the name of Charlie Johnson. So once again, that's what, Charlie Johnson, and he didn't like the neighbors, he'd move to another one. You're thinking Cale, but sometimes Cale would take that Airstream and go out to the desert, and he had a Niagara tape recorder that he'd carry with him so he could, make music out there in the desert, and
he'd already made the Eric Clapton money. And
yeah, he didn't have to live like that, but he had two of them out there because Nick Rather and another guy went out there. They helped him move out there and drive a truckload of all his stuff when he was moving to California, and Cale let him stay in his other Airstream, which, let's say KOA campground, and they had a video of Cale and this Chinese guy who owned the place getting in an argument. And the guy comes over to him and he said, I videoed this thing. He said the video was gone the next day because he said, I went to Cale to get the video. Cale, where's that video camera I had yesterday? Man, I threw it away. He said, what do you mean you threw it away? He said, I don't want nobody seeing what you recorded yesterday. And what it was, so This guy comes to Cale. He goes, Mr. Johnson, Charlie Johnson, you owed me $15. He goes, I don't owe you $15, Jack. This is what Nick's telling me. They recorded. He said, you owe me $15. You still late. He said, I already paid you, Jack. I don't owe you nothing. They got in a real big argument. He said they were just screaming at each other over $15. And but to look, you think Cale who could stay anywhere, and he would sit at the door, and there's the back wall of the Disneyland lot, where all the rides, all the, like the Santa parade stuff and whatever parade stuff, there's all right there. You could see it out his door with a big concrete wall between, the other side of them. There was this huge, huge wall with all the parade for Disneyland. Yeah, and then he moved down to Ensenada, wherever the album he did with Clapton, the name of that album, Road to Ensenada, I think, maybe. Anyway, he said he had about 5 acres there and garden, and I never went there, but.
Were you ever around Clapton?
No. Cale thought I would be. Last time I saw him one of the times, he says, Kenner, I thought you'd be at the Eric Clapton guitar thing. He said, I really looked for you. I was thinking, because when he played there at the Crossroads in Dallas, and he said, I really looked for you, thinking you. I said, what made you think I was going to be there? And he goes, I just had a feeling you were coming. And I said, well, I thought about it, but, it's hard to get in the backstage deals when you're not invited, And he was playing down here at 328 one time in Nashville. He called me from the road, said, we're coming into Nashville. Would you want to come play? I said, yeah, man. So I go down there and play with him, and I played down there with him. It was a real good show. But then he called me one day. He was coming into town, and this is when I was working for Sony as a talent scout. So he comes into town, and they wanted me to come play with him at the Belcourt Theater. I think I played down there twice with him, same kind of deal. I don't know. That was a good. Bobby Keys came and sat in with those shows, and so did Billy. So did Tony Joe White came and played, and
that had to have been great, man.
Yeah, and so did who's the guy who wrote "I Fought the Law" and Mary Tyler Moore theme song. Sonny Curtis. He came and played that night, so it was a great show. Down here at the Belcourt. But and Cale said, "Man, he gave me $500." I said, "No, Cale." He said, "No, Kenner. This is the best show we've had the whole time we've been on tour. And would you come play with us somewhere else?" And I said, "Well, where are you going?" He said, "Well, we're going up the East Coast." I said, "I don't want to go to the East Coast." I said, "You going around here?" He said, "Well, we're going to Tulsa. Come there." And I said, "Okay." Well, I knew I could get there by Sony, me doing scouting and stuff, So I go around the front. We were playing at Kane's Ballroom, and they had a camera crew there from Germany recording this thing. And it's out if you can find JJ Cale to Tulsa and back, and I'm on that playing with him, and it's really good. But if you get to see more Cale, and when he was playing at the Belcourt, I could tell he'd kind of come out of his shiny shell, real kind of still introverted, but he was talking to people and letting people take pictures, which he never did before. The time in Kansas City when we were playing there, we got through playing, and he'd only play 45 minutes. His rule of thumb was that he said, if you leave them screaming for more and you don't give them an encore, they'll go out and buy the record the next day. That's what his thoughts were, So after the show, we'd ended with Cocaine, and a crowd just always went nuts over that song. I mean, that's just like what they came to hear, which I guess most of them did. Which he said it was never about the goodness of the cocaine, it was always about the badness. And so after the show, well, the kids started screaming for more, and they were tearing up we were playing at the Kansas City Music Hall, and they were tearing up the place. And the manager comes back there, stage manager, and Cale said, "No, I don't do encores." And he talked to the manager. The manager, Audie, goes, he won't do it. So the guy comes to me, or Audie does, and he goes, "Go talk to Cale and see if he'll do an encore, man. I go, "Cale, they're tearing up this guy's place out here, man. Would you please just come out here and do one more song?" "All right, by God, let's do one more song. Let's do Cocaine again." So we go out there and do Cocaine again. And we didn't do all of it. We just did enough of it, so people started flying back in who hadn't left yet, and he did that, and that was it. I had to throw that in. He just didn't do encore. So anyway, so now I go back to Kane's Ballroom. So I've showed up at Kane's Ballroom, and I go in the front door, and his wife's on stage, and they're setting up, and she goes, Cale, you won't believe who just walked in the front door. And he goes, Bill Kenner. And he goes, and I said, how'd you know? He said, because you said you'd be here. By golly, here you are. I'm so glad you came. So, I mean, it was just, that made me feel good, He didn't have to turn around and know who it was. And I think it was before then, that's what I was trying to get to. At 3:28, I was there, came there for the sound check and sitting out there in the audience, and he told me, he said, well, I got to tell you something, Kenner. He said, I finally married Christine. I said, wow, well, good for you, Cale. He said, yeah, she's been around with me for 15 years now, taking care of me and knows all my weirdness and stuff. I thought the best thing I could do was to marry her, So, well, good for y'all. I mean, that's what I went to 328 for. Just he and I sitting out there by ourselves, and they're doing mic check, and he said, they're going, shh, shh, shh. And he goes, now, do you ever hear me go, shh, 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 on a microphone? Or go, testing, real loud? He said, I never do that kind of stuff. I said, nobody does that kind of stuff, but sound guys, I don't know why they do it. Let me tell you one other thing. So we were on, he gave me my first 4-track, and Leon gave me the drum machine. So those guys knew I was into writing songs and home demos like they did, because that's what they were about. They always had to have a place, to do their ideas, and whenever they saw them coming. And so Cale gave me my first 4-track and a mixing board. And then his manager, Audie Ashworth, who was tired of the drum, came to me and called me up and said, man, that recorder's not yours. Cale wasn't supposed to give that away. I said, well, and the mixing board too, we've got writers here that use that stuff. And I went, well, I mean, Cale gave it to me. He said, well, you need to bring it back. And I said, no, I tell you what I'm going to do, Audie. I'm going to take it out to Cale's house to the lake, and you can come get it there so he knows how it went down. I'm not going to do that. I want him to see what's going on here. But anyway, he was nice enough to do that. And he goes, oh, Audie's just tight. He's just tight. I'm sorry, Kenner, So when I was on the tour, we went up to Vancouver and Victoria, and we were coming back, and he goes, you want a microphone? He said, I've ordered a couple of these PCM microphones, which is a plastic plate, that picks up. We were using some of those he was recording everything live then on Niagara tape recorder in the back of the bus. He had an engineer that came with us, and he had a couple of those set up on stage. He said, I'm getting some more of these. He said, you want one? I went, yeah. He said, I'll get you one. So he got me a microphone. I still got it here somewhere. But, he knew I was into the stuff like he was, and the old amps and guitars and stuff that's why we were pals, I guess, because it was just fun, Yeah. I keep saying that, but that's what it was. Getting great music, and I just don't know who to go hear to turn me on. Maybe Pat McLaughlin's about the closest I want to go to hear something that's kind of fun, groovy things. And he really liked jazz stuff and old blues stuff.
Like who in particular?
No, I can't think of any names offhand, but, Karstein, his drummer, who they grew up with there in Tulsa, Karstein carried a record player with him on the road all the time. So every night after the show, he'd go and have a party in his room and break out his record player and all these old blues records. I mean, old things that I can't recall anybody. I guess like Lightning Hopkins or Lead Belly or, other stuff that I grew up with around Houston from the Third Ward stuff. Was right there by my dad's old company. So I was kind of, knew a little bit about that stuff. That wasn't what I was into. I wasn't growing up. But
do you remember the last time you saw JJ?
I guess it was at the Tulsa doing the video thing, the Tulsa and back video. Then we talked a few times after that, and we always had a good time talking. That was kind of neat just to go. And I told him before he died, a couple of months before he died, I said, Cale, I got to tell you I love you before you go. before we hang up. I didn't know he was going to die. And he said, "Oh, Kenner," and, you know, "Oh, man." I said, "Well, I just had to tell you in case something happens, you know." So that was pretty cool just to get to say that after all the years and fun and touring and recording. And I was going to say about the bluegrass band I took out to his house. And I remember Butch Robbins was playing banjo. This mostly the guys from Bill Monroe's bluegrass band that I took out there. I think Blaine Sprouse was playing fiddle, and I played mandolin. And we recorded a bunch of stuff, but I don't know whatever happened to it. But his wife said, "Man, she's got so much catalog, stored so much stuff." She said, "I got 250 guitars." I guess one of them was the one I gave him. But she said that there's just so much material. Well, you just start, and I think she's got a lot of lawyers that help her, or people, you know, other people who are going through the archives that they're stored. You know, it's kind of edited because we were doing that tour, and Cale wanted to video the whole tour. So we hired this guy, Rick Horton, I think his name was, from here. He was a great engineer, and Chad Haley, who I'm still in contact with, and who was a great engineer. That's who was with Deal Young, engineering and designing, working in studios and stuff. And then the four of us in the band and Audie, that was it for Cale's tour. But anyway, so you go on that go on to 81 on the road, JJ Cale on the road, 1981, I think it's called. And you'll see my name listed. It's just three of us besides his. So it's a small band. I mean, but it was really cool. And there's a lot of excerpts from that tour in different places. But what had happened is Cale hired this, or Audie did maybe, his manager, hired this newsman from Denver who, you know, did a lot of location news shots and stuff, and his wife to follow us around in their Volkswagen Beetle. So we were on a bus, and this little Beetle following us around everywhere with all his gear. But the guy, what he did everything. He shot everything. But doing a news kind of guy, he would just shoot little things here, and he never did get a whole song. He'd just get a little bit here, and he'd move around here and get some of this side of the song. And he did that with everyone on every show. So they never got a whole song of the goddamn. So you can tell this on this video, I'm telling you about how they, you know, shots from here and there, and then he kind of made the music work, however did it, maybe from what Rick did, however that was. But it's not like one whole, you see the show. You're just seeing little excerpts from one show, and then they'll see another show, and then maybe from that last show you just saw. And it's just a lot of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Well, that's just the way that's just the way he did it. No matter what he had a problem, that's what he didn't know what was going on till later when they started talking to him. He goes, "Oh no, man, he ain't recording anyone's song. He's just he's a news reporter."
Yeah.